If no question, let us start our today's lecture on Introduction to Ecological Chemistry. Today we shall discuss on an exciting topic, the ecological chemistry or biochemistry of plant pollination. And
Sir, I didn't understand the term stigmatry. So, from and behavior.
okay, we shall discuss later on. Let us start the topic now, the biochemistry of plant pollination. Can you see the slide? Is it visible? Is it moving?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. So today we shall discuss in detail about the biochemistry of plant pollination. Plant pollination, I think it is very familiar topic to you. The transfer of pollen from the male anther to the female stigma. The process is called pollination. And this is very important for cross-pollinated plant because plants are known as sitting duck. They cannot move away for the mating. The male anther needs to come to the female stigma for pollination and to development of the seed. And interestingly, in the co-evolutionary process, there are some other aids that help plant for the pollination, although they cannot move. So in the image, you can see how pollen from the anther can move to the stigma, and then the fertilization is taken place. So why pollination is important? Pollination is sexual reproduction in plants and is important for evolution. And sexual reproduction produces variable offspring, creating diversity and variation among populations. Shuffling of genes during pollination, the shuffling of genes are taken place. We don't pollination, pollinators or the pollinating plants, they have no regulation, but the shuffling of genes are taken place. As a result, we can see, for example, in case of jackfruit, you cannot find identical jackfruit from different plants due to pollination, cross-pollination. Huge diversity we can see. You need variation for natural selection to occur. Actually, if there is no pollination, we couldn't find any diversity in the plant kingdom. And diversity is the key for, the biotechnology or improvement. Sexual reproduction is advantageous to an organism only if it happens with someone other than itself. For example, in case of self-pollination, you cannot find such a diversity. So outbreeding is good, inbreeding is bad. Inbreeding depression taken place, the bigger of the, any genotype can be happen. Sexual reproduction in animals, it is easy because you have separate male and female individuals, and in case of animal, they can move. Even in case of insect, you have known that they use pheromone and they can fly from one to another for the mating. But plants are, I told you, sitting duck, they cannot move away. In flowering plants, not so easy because most flowers have both male and female parts in them called perfect flowers. So flowering plants have evolved special ways to ensure outbreeding or outcrossing and to prevent inbreeding. The function of flower in the uh, natural ecosystem. Function of flowers as a botanist. Flowers are the attracting sex organ for the pollinators. Uh, they use different colorful petals, scent, nectar, pollen to advertise them and attract the pollinators. So flower, different organs, flower has different organs. For example, sepal, petal, anther or phylum, stamen, and stigma, style, or ovary. In the ovary, actually, when pollen fertilize moves to the stigma, there is a tube and it moves to the ovary and fertilization is taken place. And overview of floral organs, already you know that I discussed, so you can easily understand, and these are not so difficult. Now question is pollinators. What are pollinators? There are many types of pollinators. Many flowering plants rely on animals for cross-pollination. There are two types of plants, cross-pollinating plants and self-pollinating plants. But cross-pollinating plants, they need the pollinators. Some aid. Pollinators can be living organism or non-living. For example, air pollination can be, wind can be act as a pollinator. Insects, bees, wasps, flies, butterflies, moth, they are different kinds of insects. They are heavily involved in plant pollination. Birds like hummingbirds, honey creepers, they are also involved in pollination. Mammals, some of the mammals, for example, bats, mice, monkeys, they are also pollinator. Even some reptiles and amphibians can be a pollinator. You need to know one important term, coevolution. Coevolution means interactions between two different species as selective forces on each other, resulting in adaptation that increase their interdependency. In an ecosystem, all living organisms are depend on each other, interconnected. But for example, a pollinator and a flowering plant, they have the interdependency. And if one organism is evolved, then other also evolved to fit and to keep their relationship stronger. And it is called coevolution. Both evolve in a way so that one can be beneficial for others. Animal flowering plant interaction is a classic example of coevolution. That means insect and flowering plant interaction is a classic example of coevolution. Plants evolve elaborate methods to attract animal pollinators. Animals evolved specialized body parts and behaviors that aid plant pollination. And you'd be excited to know all the details because lots of knowledge already been discovered to understand the plant pollinator coevolution. A word about pollen is the shape and form of pollen is related to its method of pollination. Very interesting. All pollens are not in the same shape and same form. So pollen morphology is also interesting subject. Insect pollinated pollens, in case of insect pollinated plants, pollens are sticky of barbed pollen grains. For example, here, this is, scanning electron micrograph. You can see the barbed pollens, they are spiny and they are sticky so that they can easily stick on the surface of the insect leg and other mouthparts. So they can move from one flower to another flower with the insect. Here is the very nice structure. You can see the pollen structure. You see pollen naked eye, but under scanning electron microscope, you can see the structure in detail. Wind pollinated species is lightweight. Pollen are lightweight, small, relative to the or comparatively insect pollinated pollen, uh, and smooth. For example, corn pollen. Corn means maize, uh, and here you can see very nice structure, very smooth and very small corn pollen. So if you compare with the previous one, you dandelion pollen, the upper one, and the lower one is the maize pollen. And the study of pollen, this is another branch of knowledge, is called palynology. Palynology is a subject where people study the structure and texture and other properties of the pollen. And so study of pollen is called palynology. Animal pollinators, bees, are very important. For example, honeybee. So bees are the most important group of flower pollinators. They live on the nectar and feed larvae, also eat the pollen. So they not only live on the nectar, but they also eat pollen, because pollens are rich in protein. Bees are guided by sight and smell. Very interesting how bees find the right flower. They have a powerful sensing system to smell. That means aroma is one of the clue that guide them. Another is the color of the flower. Bee has a good vision. See yellow and blue colors. Bee can see yellow and blue colors. Also ultraviolet light, not red. Ultraviolet light, they can you can see a flower white, but if from the sunlight ultraviolet light pass through that white flower, if there is flavonoid, it may quench like blue, and blue color we can see, we cannot see because we cannot see the ultraviolet light. Flowers have honey guides. This is another interesting clue. Honey guides and bee landing platforms. So as I mentioned, coevolution. So those plants needs bee as pollinators or bee visiting plants. Flowers have honey guides and bee landing platforms. What is honey guides? Here you can see honey guides. That means in the petal you can see nice color, and that indicates the presence of nectar and suitable for the bees. And there are bee landing. Bee needs to land. You see petal are flat and bee can land on it. So landing platforms is also important. So butterflies and moths also guided by sight and smell. They also sight and smell. Butterflies can see red and orange flowers. Here you can see. So if you see butterfly, mostly they love red and orange flowers, usually shaped as a long tube because of insects' proboscis. In case of butterfly visiting flowers, you can find the flowers have the long, tube. Here you see long tube because butterfly is mouth parts has proboscis. Proboscis to get the nectar. Proboscis is like straw, and butterfly's mouth part is siphoning type. So it can use straw-like, mouth parts to, pass through the tube and get the nectar from inside. So other insect cannot have those, nectars, and you see how they co-evolved. Moth-pollinated flowers are usually white or pale with sweet or strong odor for night pollination. So night pollination is usually happen by the moths. Here you can see the love, white and pale color. Flies, and most of the white flowers, they are blossom at night and they have the strong smell. Flies like flowers that smell like dung or rotten meat and lay their eggs there, but larvae die due to lack of food. Beetles pollinate flowers that are dull in color but have very strong odor. So beetle needs strong odor but dull color. Birds, very nice. You can see here hummingbird. Birds have a good sense of color. They like yellow or red flowers. And if you browse, birds pollinated flowers in the net, you can find lots of them. And people studied a lot about how hummingbird, get the nectar and do the pollination. Really amazing physics is here. But birds do not have a good sense of smell. This is the interesting point. But birds do not have a good sense of smell. So bird pollinated flowers usually have little odor. Interestingly, in chocolate, we all love chocolate, and chocolate contains some secondary metabolites, phenolic substances, very good for our health, and they are antioxidant. But a dog, for example, your pet, never offer the dog the chocolate because they cannot digest secondary metabolites. Flowers provide fluid nectar in greater quantities than the insects. Flowers provide fluid nectar in greater quantities than the insects because the pollinator, the bird, size of the bird and body weight and requirement is higher than the butterflies and other insects. So the beak of the bird, you can see nicely designed to get the nectar from the inside, which other insect cannot do. So here you can see several, all the flower colors are very bright, and they are red and yellow, attract the insect. Hummingbird pollinated flowers usually have long tubular corolla, very long and tubular corolla. So, and hummingbird beak is like that. Pollen is large and sticky. In case of bird pollinated flowers, pollen is large and sticky. Mammals like bats and mice also pollinate flowers. Bats pollinate at night, so flowers are white. Mouse pollinated flowers are usually inconspicuous. They open at night. Why do animals pollinate plants? This is a fundamental question. They get a reward, food, in exchange for moving their pollen to another flowers. So what kind of food? For example, nectar, a sugary solution produced in special flower glands called nectaries. And nectar contains various, sugary substances as well as amino acids and other nutritious substances for the requirement of the pollinator. Nectar concentration matches energy requirements of the pollinator. Bird and bee pollinated flowers have different sugar concentration. Pollen is high in protein. Some bees and beetles eat it. Flowers can produce two kinds of pollen, a normal and a sterile, but tasty. kind for the insect. And pollen in honeybee collect pollen and make aquaregia, or like some how to say royal jelly for the queen, because contains a huge protein. Getting the pollinators attention, plants advertise their pollen and nectar rewards with colors. For example, bees see blue and yellow and UV, while birds see red and yellow. Bats don't see well, so flowers are white. Nectar or honey guides are also another clue for advertisement, a visual guide for pollinator to locate the reward. For example, pansy flower. Aromas for insects, nectar can also be carrion or dung smell. Plant mimicry. Some plants take advantage of the sex drive of certain insects. This is really funny. Certain orchids look like female wasps and even smell like them. You see, just like a female wasp, and males try to mate with them, but in the process, they pollinate the plant, and the orchid gets pollinated, but the male wasp only gets frustrated. That means some cheating type, elusive behavior of flowers and the insect. Even in the nature, you can see not rational. It is not rational. Adaptation for pollination. Attraction, visual cues like color, shape, and size. That means flower architecture is very, very crucial for attracting the particular insect for the pollination. Olfactory cues, scent, odor, and reward like nectar, sucrose, water, amino acids, and other nutritional substances are in the nectar. That means all nectar are not same chemical constituents, and the energy level, that means the sucrose and other sugary substances dependent on the visitors. Pollen contains vitamins, minerals, and high concentration of protein. And behavioral, reward, recreational motivation. For example, we love flowers. Actually, flower in nature never, they never born or blossom for pleasing the human. But human, from the funeral to the birth of the baby, everywhere we use the flower, because flower has a very attractive architectural color, shape, and size, so visually attract us. And also some flowers have scent that attract human also, and human discovered lots of colors as well as the aromatic substances from the flowers, and they are being used in the textile or other design, and the colors, natural colors, and also the scents are used for perfume industry. So osmophores release scent as alternate attractant. Sometimes the scent is reward, a behavioral reward. Insect also sense the smell and is a reward, and they feel happy, or seeing the flowers also, the color also attract them. So there are lots of unique and diverse colors in the flowers. Beetles as pollinators, lousy flight accuracy and heavy feeding. Target of beetle is large and alternate entry. Heavy flower parts. In case of beetle visiting flowers, flower parts are, for example, petals are heavy. Pollen load is heavy. So in the Fantasy Island, this type of plants are also present. So there are incredible diversity in the flowers. So hovering birds and use this type of flowers. Parsing bird and same sequence stiff-leaf bases. Okay, this is very interesting. Here you can see the funny thing. Charles Darwin, one of the famous biologist. He is known as the father of evolution. About 250 years ago, he was a professor at University of Cambridge, and he went to see the earth with a big ship called Beagle for 5 years to discover the nature. And Darwin described an orchid and Angracium sesquipedale from Madagascar. He also visited many countries, and he landed Madagascar. He found an orchid which has 11.5 inches nectar spur. 11.5 inches nectar spur. That means if insect needs to get the nectar, then insect needs to have mouth parts 11.5 inches long, have straw like, for example, a butterfly. He predicted that there would be a pollinating animal with 11.5 inches mouth parts to drink the nectar, but he never found the animal. Much later, in 1903, Gentupan Morgani predicted its pollinator was found with an 11.5 inches siphon, that is straw, in the mouth parts. So this is really exciting. When insects, bats, birds visit flowers to feed on or collect for future consumption, the nectar and pollen, they usually pollinate the flowers in the process, so that both partners clearly benefit from this mutualistic association. There are 3 biochemical factors involved in this mutualistic association. One is scent, another color of the flowers, and third, nutritional value of nectar and pollen. So as a pollinating animal approaches a flowering plant, one of the signals it receives is an olfactory one from the flower scent. Animals live in a world of chemical communications of pheromones, and they are undoubtedly able to detect terpenes and other volatile compounds from the flower odor from some distance. As pollinator arrives near the plant, it also receives a visual signal in the contrasting color of flower against the general green leafy background. As it alights on the flower, it may be drawn to the nectar by visual honey guides on the petal, derived from the differential distribution of pigments within the flower tissue. Finally, as it transfers the pollen from anther to stigma, it gains its reward, a nutritional one, based on the sugar and other constituents of nectar and pollen. Here is the olfactory system. In our mouth parts, here you can see olfactory system is sensory system used for olfaction, the sense of smell. To get the sense of smell is called the system of olfaction. Most mammals and reptiles have 2 distinct parts of their olfactory system: main olfactory system and accessory olfactory system. Here you can see there are different parts in the olfactory system. And to get the stimuli, there are some neural receptors. So then they can perceive the signal, and where olfactory system locates in our nose. And then they perceive the signal, and that signal stimulate. Role of flower color. flower color actually is that ecochemical, and they are basically flavonoidal compounds. So color preferences of pollinators, chemical basis of flower color, evolution of flower color, and honey guides. These are the important role of the flower colors. And in case of flower scents, there are different types of scents, insect, pheromone, and flower colors also linked. Role of nectar and pollen, sugars of nectars, amino acids of nectar, lipids in nectar, nectar toxin. There are some toxin also present in the nectar to deter the other pollinators, but the real pollinators adapted to that toxin. Extra floral nectar is nutritive value of the pollen. So these are all about the brief biochemistry of pollination. We shall discuss more in depth in the next class. I guess you can understood now the basic of the plant and pollinators, animals, interdependency, and how mutualistic relationship between plants and the pollinators. So you can ask some question.
Sir, I have an inquiry.
Yes, ma'am, please.
Sir, you have mentioned the terminology osmophore, and I couldn't get it, sir. Sir, you have mentioned the terminology osmophore. So what was it? I couldn't get that.
Osmophore. In
Yes,
which
sir.
topic we discussed osmophore?
Sir, it was just before the Darwin's flower part.
Okay. Osmophore. Release scent as alternate attractant. Osmophores means release of scent as alternate attractant. So scent release from the attractant, there are color and honey guides and others. So release of scent as alternate attractant is called osmophores. Clear?
Sir, could you please repeat again? I cannot understand properly, sir.
That means flower attracts the pollinator in many ways, color or honey guides and other ways. But release of scents, aromatic compound, volatile compound to attract the pollinator is called osmophores.
Yes, sir. Yes, I get it. Thank you, sir. Sir, another one, sir. Sir, nectar toxins. Sir, it's a bit interesting. So
Nectar toxin, yes.
briefly?
In the nectar, nectar is liquid substances, contains lots of vitamins, sugars, and amino acids. But some nectar also contain toxin. Toxin for almost all the pollinators except the real pollinators, because real pollinator adapted to that toxin so that others cannot have that toxin reserved for a particular pollinator. So toxin is always a species specific. Clear? For example,
Yes,
bitter gourd, corolla, contain cucurbitacin, bitter, and but human loves it. Some, the young generation, they do not love much, but human loves that bitterness, adapted to that. So nectar contains some this like of toxic substances, but the genuine pollinator who evolved with that flowering plant can tolerate that toxin, and it helps others not to compete with that nectars. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Thank
Good
you.
question. Any more question?
Sir, I have a question regarding the basic principle of coevolution.
Yes, basic principles of coevolution is that in the earth, in any ecosystem, one organism is depend on others. As I told you, the hummingbird pollinate pollinates some of the flowers, not all the flowers. So flower, also the architecturally quite different. So that hummingbird big size is also fit with the get the nectar from the inside of the flower. So that means both friends, that is both organism, animal and plant, evolved in a way so that one fit to another for this mutualistic relationship. So it is called the coevolution, and you cannot find all the flowers, birds have similar beak, or all the flowers have a similar tube-like, a petal. Any question?
Sir, if they are both evolving in a way that so that they can both gain and benefit, sir, aren't they making things more complex by evolving to have tubular shaped petals or evolving to
Yes,
have long tubes?
it is complex because to avoid the competition and make the relationship more specific. Yes, as you know, the survival of the fittest in the earth, every organisms in a slow pace, evolution is going on. Evolution means mutation in the DNA and phenotype, morphology also governed by the DNA sequence. So if mutation is taken place, some mutation dramatically change the morphology. And if one organism mutate, the other organism also mutates so that they can fit together in case of this type of mutualistic relationship. But obviously, you must understand that it never happened in a day. It takes a longer period of time. Any question?
Sir, I have a question.
Sure.
Sir, in a book, I read a term pen mixes, which is related to the pollination. Where selected pollens are used to pollinate the selected plants, sir, where it is done and in which plant it is used.
Oh, pardon, can you repeat the term?
Sir, pen mixes.
Okay.
Sir, it is not related to the lecture, but
Yes, in case of pollination, I told you, the pollen are incredibly diverse in morphology as well as physiological properties also. So it is evolved in a way so that the pollinator can get the benefit, and there are some selectivity among the pollinator and the pollen or the flower structures. So this relationship is very interesting and specific. But there are some, differences also. Not all cases the pollinators are and host plant are, very specific. There are some insects have a wider range of pollination also. There are lots of terms you can find in this topic, because palynology is really a new discipline, and obviously you can find lots of new terms and go through the palynology. In Google you can find lots of new terms and get more insight about the coevolutionary process between the pollinator and the plant. And our focus in this course is the interdependency of the organism, or interactions between and among the organisms using the small molecules, for example, flower colors, or chemical composition in the nectar, or aromatic compound released from the plant volatile compounds, mostly terpenoidal. They are all ecochemicals, and they are designed in a way so that particular or specific pollinators are getting reward and for the pollination. So pollination by the insect or animals are not free. Flowers also pay the wages, or that means reward. It is called reward. Term is reward. If you carefully study the nature, you can find the interdependency of different organisms and relationship are not free of cost. There are some exchange, and really amazing. That means nothing is free in this earth. Any question? If no more question, please go through the plant pollination, ecological chemistry. In the Google, you can find lots of literature, and I have a book, Introduction to Ecological Biochemistry, published by Geoffrey B. Harborn, very famous, ecological chemist. He was the supervisor of my supervisor, Professor Satoshi Tahara. Harborn died possibly in 2000, 22 years ago. But anyway, all the best. Thank you so much.